Lou Brasson was 36 when police would uncover literally thousands of inappropriate files depicting minors stored on his home computer. Brasson's collection of prohibited material was one of the worst his hometown of Nepean in the UK had ever heard of. According to the law as upheld by the Bodmin Magistrates Court, before which Brasson was set to appear, offensive images are classified as either Category A, B, or C, depending on severity, and with Category A being the worst. I can't really go into any detail on what these categories potentially depict, but you've got to trust me that these categories cover just about every depraved act you're probably capable of conceiving, maybe even worse, depending on who you are. Between August 2020 and January 2021, in less than half a year's time, this individual, Lou Brasson, had both made and amassed quite the disturbing collection. And if you caught that just now, yes, I did say made and amassed, so he not only just collected this inappropriate media, he apparently also participated in creating it as well. When authorities raided his computer, they were, I'm sure, disgusted to uncover the following: a total of 196 Category A images, 615 Category B images, 1,895 Category C images, an additional 154 prohibited images, and an unspecified number of videos as well. According to a local outlet, Cornwall Live, I quote, "The offending was so serious that only an immediate custodial sentence was appropriate." I want everyone to remember that quote as we go along. Namely, I want everyone to keep in mind that his crimes were deemed to be so deplorable that for the safety of others, the governing authorities this case came before felt pretty strongly that the safest and perhaps the only option was to ensure that this man was locked away. I think we can all safely conclude that this man the cops and courts were dealing with here was one pretty sick and depraved individual. Interestingly enough, but perhaps not too surprisingly, Brasson would at first try to deny the allegations against him, but in the end, in the face of so much damning evidence, he'd eventually cave in and admit that he had a problem. Accordingly, Brasson pled guilty to 3 counts of making indecent images of children and possession of prohibited images of children. He was subsequently sentenced to 1 year imprisonment, plus some stipulations with regard to his internet usage for the duration of the next decade and that sort of thing. If a 1-year sentence seems light, considering the gravity of his crimes, you're not alone. I can only tell myself that maybe in Nepean, England, they just do things a little differently, but I don't really know. As hard as it is not to be a little bit angry and thinking that for what this guy did, a year behind bars is nothing but a slap on the wrist, I do try to tell myself, well, okay, maybe it's just a year, but that's still an extra year to have time to think about what you did wrong. And certainly, of course, 1 year is better than nothing at all. But wait, because there's more. Or there's less, depending on how you look at it. Claiming the desire and urgency to get better, once he'd been sentenced and gotten all comfy in his new cell, I don't think it was too long before Brasson would end up before a judge again. This time it was Brasson who was asking to be heard out. According to a motion filed by Brasson and his attorney, Brasson would stand before the magistrate's court and complain that prison life was not being good to him, except that this may not have been for the reasons people might commonly suspect. Ironically, Brasson, the guy just caught with hundreds of his own homemade images, claimed that his cellmate was too much of a perv for him to tolerate living with. You see, Brasson stated his cellmate would spend all day long looking for racy material to watch on the TV, and this, Brasson argued, was an impediment to his own rehabilitation. You'd think the solution would be simple: just move Brasson to another cell, help put him in solitary if you have to, or else you can always just rip out the TV. It's an unnecessary luxury in prison anyway. Or maybe the cheapest solution of all is just hand Brasson a pair of earplugs. Problem solved. Except Brasson's attorney, Barry Hilliard, would take the argument a step even further to say that it wasn't just Brasson's cellmate, it was everybody within that environment that was against Brasson's best interest to be around at all. As Hilliard would tell the court, it was imprisonment in general that was holding his client back. The jail system, Hilliard argued, was a place full of offenders, not unlike Brasson himself, and being forced to live among such a depraved population, wall to wall with individuals, again not unlike Brasson, preoccupied with only the fulfillment of their own carnal desires, well, this could only serve to stunt any progress Brasson hoped to make toward his own betterment. Basically, how does a stop being a perv if they're forced to live among other pervs day in and day out? And I would in fact agree on the basis that it's probably a lot harder to live in denial in that kind of an environment where everyone else's pervy behavior only serves as an unbearable reflection of your own, I would guess. In addition, Hilliard would argue that from behind bars, there was no way for Brasson to access any of the numerous community resources available only on the outside. Even Sprassen's partner, who had decided to stick beside him and show support for his recovery, had already compiled a list of resources which could specifically assist Sprassen to become cured of his embarrassing condition, just not so long as he remained behind bars. Well, in an unbelievable decision, not only was Sprassen's case not laughed right out of the courtroom, but on the contrary, Judge Anna Richardson and accompanying magistrates would agree that Sprassen made a valid point. And accordingly, Sprassen's prison sentence would be promptly replaced by a 3-year community order, which means more or less that as long as for 3 years Sprassen continues his efforts at getting better via support groups or perhaps the occasional talk therapy session, Lou Sprassen, one of the worst pedos that part of the world has probably ever seen, is just like that a free man. As a final aside, there has been yet no word on when the court plans to release all of the other offenders who I'm sure are all equally as eager as Sprassen was to start getting better. That's it for today's installment. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you think you might want to come back, and comment if you have anything to say. Just be respectful to everyone is all that I ever ask. I'll be on my way for now, but I look forward to seeing you next time. Stay safe, and as always, sweet dreams.